Okay, now we can see my screen?
Wonderful. We're all set. Thank you so much.
Well, great. Thanks for the time. What we're going to show you today is a new offering in the property management accounting vertical. It's our offering of Imperium powered by Acumatica. With me today is Stephen Hirsch, our product manager, who will actually be doing our hands-on presentation. And we're going to talk a little bit about what we think the technology stack looks like in the back office, and how Imperium can be the keystone to hold that stack together. So IBS has been in the property management accounting software business for 40 years. We've been in the metropolitan New York area offering solutions to customers like Vornado, Mack-Cali, the Resnicks, the Files, those types of organizations who have been using our product for 20 to 30 plus years. Our new offering, a couple of years ago, we were looking at the marketplace and needed a new platform to go forward. We wanted something that was going to be native to the cloud, but that could be deployed either in the cloud, the public cloud like Amazon, in your own private cloud, or within your own firewall if that's how you wanted to deploy the software, which makes it a little bit different from others in the space that are all SaaS offerings. This can be offered can be deployed in any number of environments. We also were looking for a platform that wasn't necessarily user-based or property-based. So Imperium comes with unlimited number of users and an unlimited number of properties deployed out of the box, and you can grow as your organization grows. You can add as many users as you need be. We wanted a platform that was modifiable and that we could customize for each individual user, and we chose Acumatica's product to build Imperium in. You know, today's world in the CRE marketplace is a world of multiple cloud solutions. As Turner talked about earlier today, the ability for these applications to integrate is really the promise we've been making for 15 years of being able to bring all these applications together. The cloud actually gives us that opportunity to be able to use APIs and exchange data seamlessly between all these different applications. At the end of the day, you need a system of record. You need an accounting system. And that's where we think Imperium falls, is that place where everything resides, one system of record that can give and get data from whatever applications in the cloud may require the use of that data. We know that automating the back office is not the most exciting thing in the world, but we also know that there's lots of costs that can be taken out of the back office. You know, 62% of all the cost of the back office is manual labor. We touch every lease document that comes through. We have to enter all kinds of stuff around payables and receivables and commissions and reporting and all this stuff that has to be touched. You walk into any real estate office in the country and you're going to see stacks of paper around. And this is all manual labor of moving this paper throughout the organization. And we know that if you look at these individual functions and these individual cloud applications and integrate it into Imperium, that you can substantially lower the cost of that work. You know, just in commission management, if you look at the average transaction, it takes a couple hours to set up in a system. You have to do all the record keeping, do all the journal entries, do the invoicing, distribute all the cash. If you could just save 45 minutes of that time, 90 minutes of that time, you can pick up 3 to 5% of the compensation over a week of productivity by automating that process. I think if you were around this morning and you saw Commission Track's presentation, that being able to set those up one time and have the transactions occur through the life of the transaction automatically certainly automates that process and streamlines the operation. You know, one of the things that is still done in most of the places, the old-fashioned way is somebody sends us an accounts payable invoice. We touch that accounts payable invoice. We open the envelope. We process it through. It gets the approvals. It gets entered into the accounting system, and all that touching that invoice costs about $9 to get a single invoice into the accounting system. This can be automated with AP workflow applications like an Avid Exchange that can drive that cost down to $1.50 versus $9. Then you have to cut a check, and somebody has to approve that check. You have to cut that check. You have to print it. You then have to put it in an envelope. You have to stamp it and send it out. That costs about $7.15. I know one of the things that always irks me is when I get a $4 check, because I know the organization paid twice that much money to cut me that check. You want to give it back to them. I don't take a picture, deposit in my bank account, go on my merry way. But we know that automated payments, you could drive the cost down, do electronic payments, drive that cost down to about 68 cents, substantially saving you a bunch of money in the AP workflow cycle. One specific implementation that we know of is a group in New Jersey called Community Management. They own and operate about 125 properties. About 2,500 AP invoices are processed per month. Prior to implementing Avid, they had 3 AP clerks at a burden cost of about $65,000. They put in Avid Exchange and Avid Pay. Net cost after rebates on the pay side was about $35,000. When they had an AP clerk, there was no reason to replace that person, and they've saved about $30,000 per year by implementing this technology. It's about a 2-month process to get it installed and updated, get it installed and implemented, and in that first year, this organization more than paid for itself and gained about $30,000 to the bottom line. On the AR side, same type of thing. I mean, if you look at driving the collection of cash, it takes on average 48 days for a paper invoice to be paid. It's cutting the invoice, mailing it out, gets there, it gets processed, somebody has to approve it, cut a check. It takes about, on average, 48 days for that transaction to get paid. Electronic transactions, on the other hand, get paid in about 10 days. We know that in our own organizations, a couple of years ago, we started emailing invoices, just emailing invoices, and our cash collection has decreased about 50%. We actually last month sent out invoices on a Tuesday and got 2 checks in for payment on Thursday. They went to New York on Tuesday morning. Somebody processed those, put them in the system, cut a check, and put them back in the mail Tuesday afternoon. We got our payments on Thursday, substantially decreasing your working capital cash flow. And if you think about what it costs to borrow money to finance working capital, if you can drive down that time to collection, it certainly can smooth that out and take some costs out. Trinity Property Consultants has implemented a credit card payment system with Visa, where they were able to negotiate the service charges down to about half of what they normally would be, and it saved them about 51 hours of employee time by increasing the number of people who pay online from about 2% to 11%, decrease the amount of people who have to now enter in an invoice or enter in a payment for rent. So that just smooths out. If you can drive that number up to 20, 30, 40%, rent week becomes a much simpler process as a multifamily property at the beginning of the month, and eliminates some of the burden that they have of entering in all the checks that come in. If you can have an online payment system to process those things. So we think the multi-cloud in the back office can look like Imperium being the base and keystone of that piece, a product like Avid Exchange for workflow, commission track to be able to handle your commissions payable, receivables and payables, and a company like ClickPay to do electronic presentation of AR invoices and payments online, substantially smoothing out all that back office paperwork that gets processed, and can save us somewhere in the 40 to 50 to 60% of our labor costs in the back office. What I'd like to do now is just turn over some time to Stephen and let him actually show you some of what we've done with Imperium. Mr. Hirsch.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Good afternoon, everybody. Let's see if I can swap screens over here, and I'm going to show you Imperium. We are built inside the framework of Acumatica. which is a fully functioning, complete accounts receivable, accounts payable, general ledger reporting system. And we have built Imperium inside that framework seamlessly. So once you learn any part of the Acumatic or Imperium product from the property management side or the accounting side, you can use Imperium or AP, AR, GL, cash management, et cetera, without really any additional training. One thing Mike didn't mention is that we are system agnostic and device agnostic. You can use this on an iPad, on an iPhone. Screens get a little small, but I've done user security changes in the middle of the day from my iPhone for some clients that requested it. Safari, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Edge, Chrome, works in all those systems very nicely and seamlessly, and you can go from one to the other without too much concern. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to try and stay pretty high level view of the property management side of things within Imperium, not necessarily going into the accounting functionality of Acumatica, but I will touch on a few things as we proceed. I'm on the Imperium tab. I'm in a company called Acme Management, and what we're looking at is a series of tabs that are defined as work area, processes, reports, and configuration. So our system's already been pre-configured to work for Acme Management, and I'm on the Manage Property screen. We're looking at a property called Nader Homes and Nader Apartment Homes. It's active. It is a mixed use, and it's set up on the residential side as a rental property. We can handle condos, we can handle co-ops, we can handle straight commercial or residential only. I just set this up so you would be able to see both sides of the management in this case. We've got some default property information that can be entered. Anything that's usually seen in white is something that's added by the user. And then you've got some computations that are going on just to make sure that the information that's been entered in the system ties out to the information you're expecting. And then within the first tab underneath the property, where we're looking at just the general information, you'll see we have some street addresses that can be entered. They can be one street address if it's a standard high-rise in the city, or you could have multiple addresses if it's garden-style apartments in a series of streets and addresses in a apartment complex. So I'm going to go through the tabs and I'm going to show you what we have for you to manage these properties. The first one is residential related, and it's amenities, and it's generally more so related to rentals, and this allows us to create items that are associated with the individual units that are being rented within an apartment building or sold for a co-op or condo. In this case, we've set up a view as an amenity, and then we can create multiple views and give each one of those views an added market value. Those added market values can then be associated with the unit type and affect the underlying market value accordingly. Each property can have one or more attributes associated with them. These are items that are usually available to everybody within the rental property, regardless of what type of unit. Can also be used for getting information out to the online listing services and what attributes are associated with the property. In this case, we've set up a golf course, a health club, a pool. Any number of items can be added here. Moving on to the next tab, this is where we're defining the unit types. So in a residential rental, we might see something like a standard, a deluxe, a townhouse. In a condo or co-op, they could be specifically named types of units, or just something as simple as a home. We can name them accordingly. We associate a number of bedrooms and a number of bathrooms, kind of building up each one of those units. We assign a base market value, and then if we need to, we can assign and associate an added amenity view, and that amenity view will add a market value adjustment, and that will increase the total market value of each one of those units, if so desired. The next tab is our unit tab. This is really our residential rent roll. In this case, a rental. We may have something similar for the condo or co-op where we'd also add information related to the owners of each one of these. Units are added, and we can click on a unit ID. Again, a series of tabs that are defining this unit, where we're putting in our general settings of what type of unit it is, using that predefined unit types that we've set up, assigning it an address, whether or not we've got history associated with the square footage, or whether or not we've made any changes to the unit, splitting and combining it with others. Associating amenity. Amenities may not only be associated to the unit type, they could be associated to an individual unit. Property attributes, which just flow down from the property level. The history of all the leases that are associated with each one of our units will also be here, whether or not they're active, draft, expired. All leases that have ever been created and associated with a unit would be available here to view. Work orders, no matter the status that are associated with the individual unit, will be here for the user to view. Each unit will also have a rental ops page where we're going to look at the information of whether or not it's available for leasing, what its current value may be for asking rent, and a comparison of market to lease rent and a performance loss or gain to market, in this case $250 gain to market, whether or not a unit may be out of service, for what period of time and why, and whether or not we've got an occupant who may be in there but we're not including revenue, and those will come into play when we're doing our calculations on our rent rolls of occupancy and vacancy rates. We also have added a feature where we can associate utility meters. So when we add a vendor into the system, we can note that a vendor may be a utility. It could be water, gas, electric, really anything that you may really have a pass-through for. It doesn't even necessarily need to really be a utility company, but something you may have some type of regulated pass-through that needs to be made to each one of your lessees within the property. And once the utility meter is assigned to a unit, it can then be passed on and charges can be passed through to your leases. That's your unit. As you see here, we've got our unit rent roll, where we're going to see our units that we just looked at, the types, the names associated, so you can actually have a unit ID and a name that are distinctly different. A resident, one or more resident IDs and names associated with each one of these. The lease, which we'll talk about in a moment. Occupancy status, move in, move out if we've got a move out date. Current rent, availability status, market value, and out of service. One of the real neat features with the Imperium inside Acumatica is the ability at any time to add notes and to add attachments. So what we can do is just come in at any time and just drag and drop an attachment. And once that attachment's been added, it'll be available to you to be seen within the grid, and then also on the top of the screen where we might be looking at a property site map as opposed to the floor plan associated to the individual unit, or something that may be on the lease as well. So let's take a look at the lease. So again, very similar functionality. We've got a series of summary information on the first screen, where we're going to look at the property, the unit, the customer identifier, what type of lease they may have put in place, and a balance, a status, whether or not they're renewing, and that's all going to be further shown down in the details on the bottom of the screen. All the dates associated with the lease, all the dates and charges associated with renewals. We have the ability to also assign free-form notes that we can date and we can categorize by type, so we can then create reports based on those. We're going to be able to add contacts, any number of contacts, and once a contact is added, we can select what type of contact that may be. Comes in handy to know what the relationship is with any one of the people assigned to a lease. They may not just be a signer of the lease. In this case, we're showing a guarantor, and who that guarantor is actually for. In this case, our lessor is Dexter, our guarantor is Frank. Date entry screen. This is where all the original lease information is going to be put in. Security deposits, tracking of security deposits, and from the general ledger side as well. Monthly charges, we have the ability to have any number of items that are associated with individual lease, their recurring price, whether or not each individual line item may or may not be associated with a late charge. So for instance, rent may be, but maybe you're not going to charge late charges on pet fee, so they don't necessarily have to be associated with a late fee. We also have the ability to make any one of these charges for a limited amount of time. So if the garage parking may only be from October through May because they don't want to park outside in the winter months. So you can shorten the length of time of any particular charge. Late charges can be set up. They can be fixed or percentage just on a very simple methodology and calculated every month by the property managers. Again, as I suggested, we've got our utility meter now dropped down to the lease level, where we can actually then see a history of all the utility readings over the course of this lease. Work orders. We're now to the point where we've got so many, it's hard to see the difference between the number that are on the unit versus the number that are on the lease. These are slightly different because these are related to this particular lease as opposed to the one that was on the unit page, which is all the work orders for that particular unit. In this case, we look at a lease history that is the history of the billing and the creation of this particular lease. If we have any individual charges that were set up for this particular account, you could see them on the customer AR invoice page. Generally, we're looking more along the lines of the AR invoice, where you're looking at your complete tenant ledger, getting out your current balance on the account. And then the ability to set up anytime you want an unlimited number of attributes that you can create to basically kind of create a quasi abstract for any particular customer or lease within the system. Any activity that's going to happen with this lease comes down from the drop down on the top. This is the same in commercial and residential. If you're running contract billing for just a specific lease, you can do it here as a one-off, but your renewals, you're not renewing. If we have to undo something that was done in the past, if we're vacating, if we're making some corrections, updating bill ends, or editing charges without renewals, and then things like preparing invoices, creating payments, and preparing credit memos, if all these are being done manually as opposed through an electronic format, it's easier to do them here and say, I want to go ahead and prepare an invoice and have the entire accounts receivable screen pre-populated with all the information regarding the lease, the customer, the property, and the unit. Right? So instead of having to manually enter this information, it'll pop up there for you, and then we can just go ahead and create the line items associated with that charge, credit memo, or payment. So that's our residential lease. We're going to leave the page because I did change something. It's asking me if I wanted to save it. And we're going to move over into property space. Property space is really our stack or our build out of the original space within the commercial side of the property. What we're doing is defining a space, giving it a description, situating it within the building, the number of original square feet, and the start date. The concept here being that the start date is when this particular unit came into being, and we may have an end date if some of these spaces get re-demised over times and combined with others or merged. That's the split and merge features up here and editing square footage if we're doing any of that work. You'll always be able to see a history of a space, whether or not something has been combined or merged with other spaces. And you can see, if you need to, you can actually drill down and look at the lease from the property space level if you need to. Although we're going to look at them from the commercial lease more like a rent roll on another tab. We allow the users to define an unlimited number of expense pools. So in this case, we've got CAM pool A's, B's, C's. We've got insurance. We've got sanitation. That was my Bronx voice, I guess. The A's, the B's, the C's. Sanitation, real estate taxes. The current period, if we have something in place for the current period, looking at the business date within the system. And then we can put in a projected, and eventually we can put in the actual amount. So we've got a projected for 2015 of $1,375,000. That did a settle up at $1,392,000, and that actual for 2015 becomes our 2016 projected. And these can be settled up on the fly from this screen as projections are put in. They can also be from our process screen. We can do a settle up, and you'll see I'm actually just opening up a new tab. I'm not leaving the tab, I'm actually on. And I could do my settle up billing here. I'm not going to do the settle up billing here, but the settle up billing is pretty complete and a really nice workflow where we're going to look at your actual, look at the projected, look at each one of your leases, and look at the space, the recovery percentage, how much was billed during the year, and then make adjustments for the prior year, make adjustments for the current year, and make adjustments for the invoicing going forward, depending on what month, obviously, that you're in, that you're doing that recovery. So I'm going to shift over to the commercial lease. So again, similar to our unit tab, where we're looking at a residential rent roll, we're kind of looking at the commercial rent roll here by lease ID, our owners, our lease start, our lease end, our primary property spaces, because what we're doing on the commercial side is you can actually associate more than one space to a particular lease. So I'm going to open up lease 108, Nader Pizza and Pasta. Again, very similar situation. We've just got a few differences in our tab structure. Starting in the summary tab, we've got our dates, we've got our security deposits, we've got lease spaces. So in this case, we've actually got two of those property spaces that we set up, 1,002 and 3,000, that are both been assigned. One is primary, the other secondary. We can have any number of them here. Then we've got our charges. Our charges get built out a little bit more in depth here because we've got commercial that we now need to associate to more than one space. So we've got the two spaces, and we can have an unlimited number of charge steps associated with each space. So this first space started at $19.50 for the first year, and then jumps to $20.65, $21.15, etc. And our secondary space, I think, was just a straight $5,000 for the life of the second part of the property space. All those get created, and they generate a schedule. And that schedule, we can actually then go into at any time and see our month-to-month billings, see what's been billed, what hasn't. The asterisks represent the fact that that $5,000 per month space wasn't actually added until we got out to 2018. So that's why that wasn't billed in the past periods. We've got our expense recoveries. So this is just the base charges. And then all the recoveries that we're going to associate with this particular lease get added, and each one gets an item code that's going to be billed, a recoverable percentage, so that's not stuck at the lease level, that can be added on the fly for each individual item as it's written into the lease. Whether or not we're going to do prorations on the starting side, on the ending side, depending on what your start and end date are. Not so much important if it's the 31st, but this is the 15th, so we may want to prorate on the start. Our basis for each one of those expenses, how we're doing our payments, whether or not they're being done annually, semi-annually, quarterly, or monthly. And then we can look at our periods that we may already have in place. So 2015, we already did our settle up. We had a projected of $1,197,000, an actual of $1,212. That became our projected for 16, 17, and 18 until we do any future settle ups on their actuals for 2016. We do calculations of what our recoverable amount is based on either projection and the original expense basis, and then we start doing our billings throughout the period. Obviously, we've done some billings out into the future here that haven't been settled up yet, so we've got to go through a settle up in order to collect those prior balances that are due. Same late charge functionality here. We could add those on the fly anytime you want, and we'll start creating late charge invoices. Same utility meters, same work orders, same lease history, customer AR invoice, and attributes. So the real nice functionality here is that once you're comfortable with one side of this, the residential, the commercial, they fairly they work fairly closely together and in sync with what you're looking to do on each one of those tabs. Just to finish out the property, right? We talked about our base information, our attributes, the residential side, the commercial. We do have this work order and the work order project system that we've got within Imperium that allows us to add any number of work orders to an individual project. So this is a project for checking the outlets that got associated with two of the units within this property. This work order is for both Unit 101 and 102. We've added a task to check and install new outlets that we expect to take an hour. We have the ability to enter the actual cost, associated payable, and then have a link into the payable once it comes in through accounts payable. And if this was associated with an internal person, right? This is Acme Management. We know that Acme Management is our management company. So this got assigned to me. I'm supposed to go out there and check those outlets, which explains why this is still an open work order and has not been complete. And then we can obviously report on these, create those work order tickets on the fly, send them out via email, create PDFs, print them, distribute them however we need. The ability to create charges and associate them across all the units within a property. So this is, for instance, a 2017 fee charge for $6,000 that's getting split amongst all the units within the property, both residential and commercial, right? This was more a build out for the condo co-op assessment side, but we brought it into the residential and commercial side so we can use that same programming to bill across the entire property if we need to without going in individually and creating charges on each individual lease. This is our utility meter companies. So this is just the association of the utility company to the property. Rent control for New York City has actually been moved. That's over here in our configuration page now, where we actually pull in all the rent stabilization information for New York. So if you're doing any New York rent stabilization, DHCR renewals, we track all that information and we prepare those letters for you. On the property management side, this is where we're doing a little bit more of the one-time setup that's going to be used for invoicing, creating security charges, charging month-to-month fees if a lease does not renew and has not been vacated. This is all the information that also gets created to produce our monthly statements. This is where we do our charge maintenance for annual one-time or more assessments. And if we want to associate any charges to the residential tenants that are going to cross periods, that again, very similar to the charge function for multiple periods. One of the options within Imperium is the ability to have multiple cash accounts associated with each entity or branch that is associated with one or more properties. So what we do is we try to alleviate errors as much as possible in the human context of doing this work. So for every property that gets set up within the system, we predefine what operating accounts they may use. There obviously could be more than one, but in this case, this would limit the user to, if they're putting in a payment for a particular lease on Nader Homes, that it would go to Nader's operating account as opposed to a user possibly making a invalid selection. Just some general settings on the features of the fixed asset and depreciation and some GL accounts out here at the end. So I'm just going to go back to our work area tab where we started. We've got our units in our lease. So while I've talked about them already, they also can be associated and reviewed separately, looked up separately, rather than being in the property screen and then drilling down. We have some inquiries that can be done right on the screen if you want to look for some specific information regarding to work orders, or if we want to look up a particular lease, we can just go in, look up a particular lease. This is also information that's used to generally flow into Power BI or another third party. We can send this information via ODBC and do some tiling and widgeting and customization of dashboards and bring that information back into the system. Don't think I've got that to show on this system just yet. So if anyone wants another demo, we can certainly go into a little bit more detail. On our process screen, this is where we do our month-to-month lease billing. right? So we can say that we're looking to bill for 11/01/2017, and let's say we're looking for a particular property for Nader. And this would bring up all my leases that I'm going to bill for the current month if I'm ready to bill. If we're ready to create a statement, we can create statements for an entire property at one time, or we can create individualized statements and send them out to the tenants via email. These can be PDF'd or, like I said, via email. Creating late charges across an entire property at any one time for any period, for any particular lease. We've got some property roster in the wrong place here. Import of utility receivables. These can all be processed, like I said, and then billed out to the individual leases where we do our settle-ups. And then we've got a number of imports that can be done directly for AP bills and AR invoices and payments, although we do have a lot of other what we call import scenarios that can be used during implementation. And then finally, just to discuss, we've taken all of the reporting that we need to do and pulled it over into Imperium. So we're looking at, for instance, AP by property, all the reporting that you would expect from AP, AR, looking at resident ledgers, cash accounts, general ledger transactions intra-period for more than one period, gross potential rent reports, lease expiration, lease pre-billing for residential and commercial, property rosters, rent rolls, etc. And like I said, the ability to print work orders or report on work order activity during a given month. So there's certainly a lot more and a lot more depth that can be gone into in a more in-depth demo. But hopefully I've given everyone a good high-level view of the the basics of what Imperium has the ability to capture and manage from the property management side. So I think I'm going to turn it back over to Mike.
Oh, great. Thank you. So as it certainly was an overview, there's lots of more detail if we wanted to see that. Are there any questions at this point?
There is.
Yes, we do have a couple of questions. If one of you could just kind of go over, since you mentioned so many different product types, if you could just kind of go over the IBS with the umbrella, and then Imperium, and then your other ones too that you discussed, just so everybody can see the connection.
Sure. Integrated Business Systems is the company. We have a legacy product that is called IBS Accounting, and our new product is Imperium, powered by Acumatica. So the Imperium product is the product name, and IBS is the company name. The other pieces of the technology stack that I spoke to around Avid or Click or those companies was just to give a picture of the ability to build a complete solution using multiple pieces of the technology stack. Acumatica is a cloud-based ERP system that has a built-in development platform, and we use that development platform to build Imperium within the Acumatica product. Is that any cloudier?
Multi-cloudier.
I love these jokes inserted here. They're definitely making my day.
At the end of the day, we try and keep people awake.
The next question is, can you give company background, estimated size of company? Are you only in the US or are you in Europe, anywhere else?
We are, like I said, a 40-year-old company based in Toderwood, New Jersey, a group of about 25. We have our current customer base is all US based, although we have resellers and partners around the globe through the Acumatica reseller channel. We have deals in the pipeline in the Philippines, in Malta, in other places around the world that we're working through a reseller channel to distribute the product around the world. Acumatica, in and out of the box, is multi-currency and multilingual, so it can easily be deployed in other areas of the world. What else do they want to know?
Percentage rent.
Percent.
Yes. Does your system compute percentage rent?
Our legacy system has done it for many, many years, and it is on our development roadmap. I would expect, depending on interest, it to fall within the first quarter or second quarter of 2018.
Waiting for a retail customer to push us in that direction.
You know, one of the great things about developing in Acumatica is I won't say it's easy, but it's certainly easier than, you know, what we've been doing for 40 years. You know, the underlying plumbing for percentage rents is obviously there because the commercial lease and everything associated is there. So adding the fields and the structure and the process to do the calculate, you know, accept the data, do the calculations and the billing, with the fact that we have the history and knowledge of what I would imagine of what the user is looking for a percentage rent system and what we would expect it to do, we know. So I wouldn't expect something like that to be difficult. It's in our wheelhouse.
Wonderful.
Anything else at this point?
Do we have any other questions from the audience? I'm just going to give them a few more seconds to type in there. Just to let you know, we do have one more demo. We needed to switch that one from the earlier one. We have Rethink CRE, who will be coming up next. So let's just give a few more seconds to see if any more questions pop up.
Well, I guess not.
Okay.
Thanks very much for the opportunity. I will stop the share and give it back to you.
Thanks so much, Mike and team. That was great. I really appreciate it. So
Thanks
we have
very much. Bye.